Sleep tight, my beloved. You're my ticket out of this hellhole.
Homer!
Sorry. Our ticket out of this hellhole.
But the price. But the price. But the price. Will y'all shut the fuck up?
Down from the peaks up here, right? The whole crypto market has kind of gone sideways here. But what does Louise Yamada say? The bigger the base, the higher in space. In my view, you have to have people start using that XRP, that Ripple currency, in substitute for foreign currency, but that's the utility. That's the use case for Ripple, the currency. If that's the case, then that's a pretty nice base rate.
We making moves. We making major moves. We making moves. We making major moves. We going all in like we got nothing to lose. We making moves. We making major moves.
What is up, everybody? I'm Mr. Man. Welcome back to my channel. I'm a little exhausted here. I just went for about a 12K run. If you guys are familiar with the Toronto area, I was up in Yorkdale. I went to go meet my boy up there. We were chatting about crypto. I brought him up to speed with what's going on. So let me bring you guys up to speed with the connections I've made in the crypto realm and our real world. So we've been through the stablecoins, the asset reference tokens and e-money tokens in the EU, UK going live for white papers, June 30th, 2024. MiCA rolling out MiCA rolling out December 30th, 2024. And then bam, January, no, it's not January, I'm wrong with that. But July 2025, we have Basel III. So the Basel III Endgame, also known as Basel III, is a set of international banking regulations. The U.S. regulators have proposed July 1st, 2025 as the compliance date for the new requirements with a multi-year transitional period. That multi-year rolls into 2028. There it is right there. With a 3-year phase-in of the capital ratio impact through June 30th, 2028. The proposal includes a 3-year transition period for compliance with the proposed compliance date for the final rule of July 1st, 2025. So on July 1st, 2025, you're gonna have the implementation of Basel III Endgame in the U.S. and I believe Canada's involved, and I still say Mexico. I'm gonna check my sources on that. But there's a 3-year phase-in period. All right, people, don't get me wrong. Do not on July 1st and bam, something's going to happen. Prices are going to shoot up. Be real with yourself. That's not how life works. Nothing happens immediately, especially on a global scale. If you're expecting instant riches, you're in the wrong game. You're in the wrong assets, all right? This is a regulatory patience game here. So I'm giving you the regulations. So what else is coincidentally happening in 2025 to 2028? Let's take a look at that. All right, welcome to the SPARS pandemic. This is 2025 to 2028. This is a futuristic scenario for public health risk communications put out by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And this is supposedly a fictitious virus coming out around the same time as the Basel III Accord, for the U.S. at least, the biggest conglomerate in the world, corporation in the world, the U.S.
I've actually been asked to give a potted history of our 2001 paper, which caused a little bit controversy at the time. It's a history of the things that we did do, a little bit of the history that we didn't do, and we hope that it's open for all discussions from this point of view. One of the problems Australia has is every 4 or 5 years, there's a mouse plague. We have lots and lots of rabbits in Australia, and all of which influence agricultural output. We usually use biocontrol agents to control the rabbit population, such as myxoma, calicivirus, but both the rabbits and the viruses are co-evolving to live happily together without major effects. So the idea was we needed a new biocontrol agent. The idea was to make a virus that only infects rabbits or only infects mouse, that causes immunosterility. Our modeling systems say this would be a very, very useful way of controlling the population, and for some reason it would be humanely rather nice rather than killing them. So what the idea was to make a virus that encodes a gene for a protein involved in reproduction. And the idea was the virus would infect the animal would make antibodies to the encoded protein and cause infertility. It was a nice idea, and we went about it, and the protein that we used was called ZP3, and it's found on the ovum. And it's the docking point of the sperm in this case. The idea is the animals would make an antibody like we would make an antibody to influenza vaccine and prevent fertility. In fact, it worked remarkably well, surprised us all. Those animals that were infected with a mousepox virus which contained this ZP3 were infertile for the lifetime of the animal under those circumstances. The rabbits had the same effect under these circumstances. So we had developed a new technology which caused infertility. It's the next step that we added to this that caused all the controversy. And I'll go into that now, but there's a lot of bright individuals in this audience, and I wonder if some of you have already picked up a dual-use issue that we missed at the time. And that dual-use issue is we've created a transmissible virus that causes infertility. That was never discussed at the time. And that's fascinating. In other words, I think they actually made a science fiction movie, Men of Boys or something like this, where the world was made infertile by a passaging virus. So here's an example of dual use that we ourselves have missed. We published without ever recognizing it. What we did recognize, however, was when we tried to increase the potency of these viruses that caused this immunosterility. And we added another gene called interleukin-4. And this gene is a cytokine. It's used by the immune system to stimulate antibody responses. So the theory was that we'd get better antibody responses with these viruses with this gene in. In fact, what we did find was not that the result, but the result was the viruses were highly pathogenic, and it killed mice rapidly, and even mice who were genetically resistant were killed with this interleukin-4 virus. The interleukin-4 itself suppressed the immune response, and that's why it was killing the virus under these circumstances. So basically what we had shown is that we had a greatly increased pathogenic virus that antiviral drugs didn't work against. We had showed that later. But more importantly, and this was the staggering effect that shook us at the time, was that vaccinated mice that would normally resist an infection were not resistant to this interleukin-4 virus. The interleukin-4 virus killed the vaccinated mice.
So we know vaccinated mice are dying, and we know there's a pandemic, a supposed pandemic, in 2025 to 2028. So let's take a look at the Basel III endgame, which also starts 2025 to 2028.
Basel III endgame is the US adaptation of the finalization of the Basel III reforms, also commonly known as Basel IV. This new regulation will apply to all banks with more than $100 billion in assets and their deposit-taking subsidiaries as of July 2025, with progressive implementation until 2028, and will entail a significant change in the way their capital requirements are measured from a risk-based perspective. On one hand, the advanced credit and operational risk methods are eliminated, and new standardized methods are introduced. In market risk sensitivity is improved both in the standardized approach and in the internal models-based approach. In relation to credit valuation adjustment risk, two approaches, standardized and basic, are established. Furthermore, in line with the Basel proposal, the output floor is set at 72.5% of the requirements based on standardized methods. This technical note executively summarizes the main components of the Basel III Endgame reform.
So I had shown you before, I believe it was a couple of days ago now, the Basel III, the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision here. This is the prudential treatment on crypto assets. I had shown you that stablecoins their framework from the BIS will now be implemented on right here, January 1st, 2025. So we have MICA with their stablecoin regulations going live. Keep in mind the EU, UK, Japan, and US are connected through the NATO alliance, and then you have the BRICS nations forming their own alliance now. So the BRICS utilizes Enbridge, and the US, EU, UK, Japan, other countries will be utilizing what's known as an RLN, Regulated Liabilities Network. So to some of you guys that may not be aware yet, to the US and the NATO alliance, stablecoins are the holy grail. To the BRICS nations, and I'm going to mask this sideways, the holy grail to them are CBDCs, because with stablecoins coming out first, they don't necessarily need to be backed by commodities and all that stuff. Like the US, they're not backing theirs by commodities, but there will be stablecoins in the US coming out that are backed by commodities like Pax Gold. But the USDC dollar, which is technically known as the US dollar, pegged to the US dollar, is backed by reserves and treasuries within the central bank. So there's a provision that they have to have 72.5%, as I'll show you guys, Basel III Accord, within their purview, outside of their own grasp or clutch, if you will, somewhere else. Like back in the day, we used to have vaults within a bank, sort of like that. That's what, and because the US is already innovating and has innovated within the stablecoin realm, they will be first to go. Like you see that Circle has the USDC, you see Circle has moved into the EU or the European jurisdiction already. They dropped the EURC, I believe it's called. We are on Circle's page once again, and there is their EURC, a Euro stablecoin backed by full reserves. So they're in compliance there. Stablecoin that's accessible globally on Avalanche, Ethereum, Solana, and Stellar. Similar to the USDC, EuroC is issued by Circle under a full reserved model, but they adhere to the Basel III framework. That's what it is, the Basel III Accord framework. That's where Circle gets their prudential treatment and what they have to follow with the capital reserves that they are required to hold as a company to operate digital money. So that's how Circle adheres, and that's how their coin USDC and EuroC are compliant.
Thank you for having me. And for those who are not familiar with Reserve, our mission is around expanding access to inflation-proof stable currency around the world. We do it in two different ways. Some of you may be familiar with the Reserve app or RPay in Latin America. It's in 18 countries. It's powered by a stable coin underneath. The users don't even know they're using stable coins, and they're not crypto users. Folks are using it to shield their wealth from, inflationary currencies in places like Argentina and Venezuela and so forth. And then there's the permissionless protocol, which is where I spend 100% of my time. The permissionless protocol, and I'm super, excited to be with this group too, is really a platform to white label stablecoins for anyone to roll their own stablecoin. These are asset-backed currencies. They're one-to-one asset-backed on chain. Decentralized. They come with some over-collateralization, and there's some really cool things you can do with revenue sharing. And to more specifically answer your question, the part that we're really excited about is this idea of programmable money. And when you think about money up till now, medium of exchange, unit of account, store of value, I'd argue these are kind of industrial age paradigms, right? And when you move into digital space, and you've seen this in a lot of other industries as digital has come online over the last 25, 30 years. When you can do things in digital, your production costs start to go close to zero. Your distribution costs start to go close to zero. And when that happens, it unleashes a whole lot of creativity in ways that people can't really contemplate, right? When YouTube launched, no one really knew that it would end up being 37 million video creators and then 10 other platforms that have copied it since then. When Shopify launched, people were like, well, we have Alibaba and Amazon. Why do we need that? And now there's 1 million merchants on Shopify. So these platforms that are permissionless or semi-permissionless, they unleash creativity in ways that I don't even know, and our team doesn't know. In fact, we've kind of really taken the position that we are not going to launch any of these asset-backed currencies. Our role is to cultivate a community of entrepreneurs, apps, protocols, funds, TradFi institutions, and do a lot of experimentation and sort of see what comes out of that. So, I think there's some folks think there will be one stablecoin to rule them all. That may be maybe in many decades from now, who knows what the world looks like right then. But we're in this great unraveling of the financial system right now, and there's going to be thousands of experiments. There's at least 100 stablecoins right now. It's probably going to double in the next 18 months, and it's going to keep growing pretty rapidly. I don't think there'll be millions of stablecoins, but there'll be thousands of them.
So stablecoins are the killer app, is what they're known as. But if we move into the BRICS region now, and let's take a look at what the BRICS doing, because after we take a look at the BRICS, I'm going to go back in and show you how the U.S. is going to roll this out. And we saw those key dates of 2025 to 2028. Let's go back into the BRICS now. So with the BRICS, the route they're going is the central bank digital currencies, and these are expected to play a significant role in the future of finance. By 2028, it's anticipated that several central banks will have introduced their own digital currencies with a focus on retail space, known as the RCBDs, CBDCs, or also known as the synthetic CBDCs. The integration of CBDCs will require collaboration between the public and private sector to address various challenges and drive widespread adoption.
Why do you think this time is different in the form of central bank innovation? So, Carmel, you're working a lot with central banks in Africa. Do you have any thoughts on why regulators are reacting differently in this decade to come than before?
So this is a very fascinating question, and this is something that we don't speak enough about because the average person wakes up every day and doesn't think about central banks. I know I didn't before starting up tech. But the idea of central bank money plays a very unique role, and I think there is an elephant in the room between central banks and private institutions. Private institutions see themselves competing with public money. Every time you go to an ATM machine, you convert your deposit into cash. You take it away from the bank's balance sheet, and now you have it, and it converts. You don't see it, but it converts back to the central bank's balance sheet.
Right.
The question is now, should central banks continue to play a role in the economy by providing a digital version of central bank money, or should they move away and let private money be the main form of money and circulation? I think if you look at history, there is a risk, whether it's concentration risk, counterparty risk, liquidity risk, and so on, that the private sector can fail in a way that a central bank might not. Right? So it's really a risk management, and whether private sector app providers, e-money issuers, banks want to think of it this way, yes, it does impact their business and their bottom line that central bank money continues to exist. And if people want to continue to use central bank money, that they can have a diversified portfolio, but whatever money that you have in cash is not sitting on the bank's balance sheet. That's the bottom line. And they would want more of it to sit on their balance sheet. But I think for the purpose of risk management, I think you're going to continue to see central bank money exist. And what we're really talking about is an infrastructure upgrade of that money. today we have trucks and vaults and distribution and a lot of that happens. Tomorrow you have digital vault and a click, whether to issue or remove central bank money from the supply of money.
So there will not just be stable coins. There will also be CBDCs. You heard the lady talking about that central banks, they want that on their balance sheet. The minute you pull it out and keep it in cash, that's off balance sheet for them. It's been withdrawn. It's not accounted for money anymore. It's an account receivable on their subledger, waiting for that payment to be fulfilled. All right. So CBDCs will essentially give the stable coin the blessing, if you will. Picture me as the Don. My child, kiss the ring. You stable coin, I will now give you the blessing of real money, and you shall be a wrapped product of mine, and I will call you the synthetic CBDC, and that's what you shall be known as to the people behind the scenes, because this stable coin you wrap is backed by nothing more than air tokens such as fiat currency still, that the US and the Canadian dollars have. Now kiss my ring. So we know in the BRICS nations they're going to be operating Enbridge to maneuver their central bank digital currencies by about 2028, leading to 2030, using Enbridge as their mechanism for cross-border, interjurisdictional, I guess you would call it, or intra-jurisdictional. China has a lead, their payment system, CIPS, CIPS, or is it CIPS, connected to every other entity within the BRICS nations. Meanwhile, India is only connected to 2 others. South Africa is not connected to any of them yet. So they're still connecting these things. But for them all, they have this one bank known as the New Development Bank, which is working on the BRICS currency, the BRICS CBDC, or whatever they're going to call it at that point, the BRICS coin. But they're still an intermediary for that. So going back to the stable coins, there are stable coins that will be backed by goods, commodities, commodity-backed stable coins. Pax Gold is one of them. PYUSD PayPal is just a settlement token for in the what's it called there, in the PayPal ecosystem itself, for transferring value from one place to another. It's a trading stablecoin. I wanna call that. Also backed by just fiat as well, and that's also operating on the Ethereum ecosystem. And we all know that the Ethereum is not the settlement platform as people assume it to be or make it out to be. I mean, when your gas fees cost more than what you're trying to move, and no one's using that. I'm sorry. We all know that that's a front. No central bank is using that. The goal is to settle faster, not longer, not have longer latencies and lag periods and higher fees associated. I mean, you might as well stay with what you have now until you can't use it anymore. So there will be something else that comes into play. Let's see what that could be.
It's interesting, the conversation that we've had so far, which focused a lot on CBDC, we focused on stable coins, primarily from the crypto space. What about crypto more broadly outside of that context of just stable coins? The question that everyone is asking with everything that's been going on over this last year, does crypto have a future in payments? Carmel, you mentioned Bitcoin as being this animating idea, even behind CBDC. What do you think is the future of crypto more broadly? What kind of contribution does that have to make? And Mina, I want to get you in, as that conversation progresses, on the regulator's perspective here, in terms of what role the regulatory system can play, to flourish or otherwise to guide the development of crypto. So, Ben, perhaps, in the space that you occupy, what do you see as being the future of crypto? Is there a future for crypto in 2030? What will it look like?
It's a hard question. I think that that Bitcoin really set a standard for transferring value, which I think continues to endure today. And then you saw sort of an evolution of that with Ethereum, where you had, you know, an efficient tracking and transfer of value, but then you had the ability to then add programmable smart contracts so that you could do so in a very specific context. And there's a real value proposition that's been shown by, I'll say, those two assets in particular. But then what you're starting to see is that there are other blockchains that have other, you know, value add propositions like Stellar, Solana, things that have higher throughput, are allowed to sort of, I would say, evolve those original use cases into something more effective. So I still think that there's value there, but if you zoom out a little bit, I think what crypto has shown is that people want control of their assets on a 24/7 basis. They want to remove intermediaries from that value transfer, and they don't want sort of financial services to exist within a walled garden. And so I think that's a movement that absolutely is going to continue. Whether or not specific assets are going to endure, or whether or not, you know, kind of what form they take, I think is hard to say at this point. I think Bitcoin has shown that it's quite resilient over time. I think Ethereum certainly has entered the mainstream in many ways and is now regulated directly by the NYDFS and others. So I think the regulators need to play a big role in kind of overseeing these assets, making sure that when they do get adopted by traditional financial institutions, that they're done so with oversight. But I think the kind of ethos of crypto and the shift of control and ownership of money away from a system of kind of very few intermediaries to a more democratized version of finance is going to be what endures going forward.
And
so we've heard the value add that can come through blockchains such as Solana. Most importantly, Stellar was a surprise. Not surprise, not in I didn't know that it could. I mean, surprise in the fact that somebody actually said this at a payment conference now on stage. So now you know. But what is going to be the catalyst to roll this all in? Let's take a look at what this will be, okay? This is a payments conference called WBS, World Blockchain Summit. The individual on the far right, the lady there, she's from MasterCard. The individual here, the main guy, talking about what's coming out in the States and how they're going to implement it and when they're going to implement it. We know the dates. We know 2025 to 2028 already. We saw the SPARS pandemic. We saw Basel III endgame matching the same time. Now let's hear what this individual has to say about those dates.
Something like that. What does the first 90 days look like when a CBD gets announced?
So I want to speak, I want to respect the UAE here and just admit that I have no idea, very much how the government and regulations work here. I can only speak to where I grew up. Even though I haven't lived in America for 6 years, I'm very familiar with the way that monetary and fiscal policy work over there. And you have a very divisive and opinionated public over there. And you've got a lot of people who happily go along with the things that the government asks them to do. And then you have a lot of people who ask questions and wonder if this is really in their own best interest. Right now, I think it would be very unpopular to try to enter a CBDC into the American population, and they know that, right? And they know, and I don't think that America has been watching China work on a CBDC for 5 or 6 years and doesn't have one in their back pocket ready to go. I think that they absolutely do. The question is, how are they going to implement it, right? And we know that the government, unfortunately in America, left the great vision of a very radical idea with very minimal government intervention and very much a pure democracy to a very controlling state where you saw that even more recently than ever with lockdowns. But in order for them to usher in a radical new idea, they need to create an environment to where the public is asking for it, right? And you have a very particular time in America happening right now where you have CPI or inflation increasing, still not under control. Interest rates are higher than ever. Bond markets are crashing. The highest stimulus injection into the economy ever outside of wartime and pandemic was just announced by the Biden administration, almost $1 trillion. We're inflating the monetary supply by over $1 trillion a year for the past 20-something years on average. So you have a very, very unsustainable system that's happening right now that they cannot kick the can down the road much longer. People are starting to lose faith in the ability for the U.S. to pay back their debts. This is why the bond market is not doing so well. And people are going to look elsewhere to put their money. So how do you implement something like a CBDC, which gives much more control to the government over what you choose to do with your money? Things like if they need to stimulate the economy, they can make it so that your money expires if you don't use it after a certain period of time. Well, they need an event to happen where people are asking for it. So in my opinion, the way that the US CBDC gets introduced is eventually probably 2025, 2026, after you have the elections that come through and you have essentially what's looking like hyperinflation. Something has to break. We all know that something has to break. The Fed has said it many times in the past.
We're clearly going through some sort of geopolitical event, not only in this region, but in Europe. China as well. There's likely some sort of spark that will occur. And let's face it, climate is becoming much more significant in terms of risks. And when you look at a reaction of a country to war and community, the deterioration of communities through climate change, countries have really little risk associated with there's a lot of risk actually associated with what do you do in those situations. You can affect policy, you can increase taxes to pay for certain things, or you can print more money. And at a time when there's a lot of social division, people are just not going to be paying taxes. And politicians will take advantage of that. And if you want to stimulate the economy and pay for weapon systems that are expensive or substitute food and fuel prices, which are priced in dollars, you have to print money. So I think there's going to be a radical shift in the value of money, and digital assets make a lot of sense if they're Bitcoin and Ethereum and actually create value and have scarcity. But I think with the tokenization of real world assets like gold and other assets that are real estate, etc., and even green metals that are important for rewiring food, soybean, wheat, things that are liquid, and also certain other assets that people rely on for their daily good. Those are much more solid and productive assets for the public good. And so when we look at money, we look at how does it do actual public good rather than just create a transaction or store value characteristics. How does it do things that help ultimately society? So I think there's going to be a rethinking of what money is, not just around how does it create the basic characteristics, means of payment, store value, unit of exchange, but how does it then translate into something that people can rely on when government can no longer print it? And I think humanity will shift towards something that is technologically based and certainly take advantage of the rails that Ripple and others have created to participate in that evolution.
So we've heard about the boogeyman that comes out 2025 to 2028. We've had confirmation twice now. There's going to be a spark of some sort. We've heard about the rails with Ripple. We've heard about the rails with Stellar. So now what does this look like in our real world? How does it manifest itself? You guys better take some notes on this, man. Like, I'm not just talking about this stuff to hear myself, because I understand it to the best of my ability here, and I can talk about this all day. But for the rest of you guys who cannot take notes, each one, teach one, pass the message on. If you can't replicate what I'm telling you right now, share this message, share the video. So how does this look? We have the Bitcoin halving coming up in April, May, sometime, which reduces the fees for the miners there, or reduces the payout for the miners, whatever it is there. Then we have the build-up into the presidency in November 2025. We have the ISO. Every individual, every financial institution needs to be now part of this ISO messaging service. Rich data messaging, MX messaging, messaging now. They cannot be using the MT old anymore. They have to use ISO 20022 messaging. Now, in 2024, near the end of 2024, we have the election. What does that look like as elections are coming in now? RBC and TD Bank in Canada had forecasted a 34% increase in real estate purchases in Ontario, just for homes in Ontario. Why would there be an increase, an uptick in purchases in an inflationary situation right now in the circumstances that we're living in? How does that work? Because rates need to drop at that point. So when rates are dropping, people are going to be running in to get real estate. Not the regular people, because they've already tapped out. The investors such as myself and you, if you plan for this, will be jumping back into the market, and the big boys there will be ready to go as well. So as the rates drop, real estate value, just like it did in 2021, 2022, 2020, began to build up because people were overbidding at that point. People had gotten stupid. So houses reach an unsustainable value, and this is now known as hyperinflation. The rates are going to drop to what end? I don't know. I couldn't even tell you. But the housing market's going to go through the roof. And then we're going to reach a pivot sometime. I don't know when. But when they do pivot at that point, they have to, fight inflation again, right? So they're going to drastically increase those rates again. You better believe it. Whether that's through printing money, quantitative easing, printing the money, however that looks. Anything they can do to fight this fire they are currently going through. All right? That's how that looks. That's how that looks. That's how that continues to hyperinflate the world that we live in. Real estate's a lag, but real estate is a leader in this industry. Do not forget that. If you own the real estate, if you own the money, if you own the assets, right? I care not who makes the laws. Give me the money and I'll control the world. That's how this goes down. So to recap, stablecoins go live January 1st. US begins its implementation of Basel III in 2025 in July. In 2025, there's also the supposed SPARS pandemic. That could be end of 2024, manifesting itself in 2025, kind of like how COVID did. It started off in 2019 in China and came to the West in 2020. In March is when it saw itself in the New Year's. I don't know what calendar that is, but if that's considered New Year's, that's when it's warm outside again, when life begins, when buds and lifeblood enters the world again. Right through to 2024, to 2026, 2027, 2028. 2028 is when that SPARS pandemic supposedly ends. We have Basel III implemented. Hard date. Everybody needs to be on that, at least in the US, needs to be on that now. Basel III, 2028. What else happens in 2028? Coexistence for EU ends as well. CBDCs are now going to be taking a play. We heard the individual there that was talking highly about Ripple state that money is going to be changing. CBDCs will now be the talk of the town. I'm not sure if regulations will be in there or framework will be in there now for CBDCs. And now the different jurisdictions can begin to implement what their framework on CBDCs and regulations are for their own jurisdictions look like. I also, before I go, want to wish all of you guys out there a happy Valentine's Day. I'm not necessarily a Valentine's person myself. I'm not in for any of that stuff. But on the plus side, tomorrow, February 15th, Mr. Man's birthday. That's what's up. I'm turning 41, 42. One of those. 41 or 42. I don't remember my age. I think it's 41. I'm turning 41. That's what that is. Happy birthday to me. Love y'all. I hope you guys found something in this. I'll catch you on the next one.
We making moves. We making major moves. We making moves.